At 4 a.m. on the U.S. East Coast, we're following the breaking news on two fronts this hour. The latest on Hurricane Dorian and the mass shooting that played out on a Texas highway. Welcome to viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm George Howell at the CNN Center in Atlanta, and we start in the state of Texas, where investigators, including the FBI, are now searching for answers in the latest mass shooting to hit the United States. Again, this in Midland and Odessa, Texas. The gunman went on a rampage in two vehicles, killing 5 people and injuring 21 others. Among those injured, a 17-month-old child who is, we're told, in satisfactory condition. Police have not yet released the gunman's name, except to say that he is a white male in his mid-30s, first approached by state troopers during a traffic stop, and he didn't stop that vehicle. Listen.
Wait, they don't have him yet. Come on.
The situation started about 3:17 this afternoon when a DPS trooper attempted to stop a gold Honda. When the DPS troopers got the car stopped, he was then shot by the occupant of the car. The vehicle continued westbound into the city of Odessa and shot an individual at I-20 in our east loop. Apparently, the subject then drove on our east loop to 42nd Street, where there were multiple scenes and multiple victims. At some point, the subject stole a mail truck, ditched his car, and there were other victims after that. The victim then went eastbound back on 42nd towards Synergy, which is a local movie theater, and at that point was contacted by law enforcement.
And when he says contacted by law enforcement, that means a gun battle played out, and the gunman was then shot and killed. Joey and Julie Vicknair were near the theater when all of this happened. When police cornered the shooter, here's what they had to say.
Oh my God, he's fixing to shoot. Duck it down.
Oh my God. Cody, are you down?
Are you shooting that man, that lady right there?
I don't know. I can't see. Oh my God. I think they...
Take a look at the map here. You can understand why nerves are so raw. This happening in Midland and Odessa, Texas. That is just 4 weeks ago, less than 300 miles away. That's when another mass shooting happened in El Paso, Texas. The gunman there killing 22 people. As the shooter weaved through traffic and fired off shot after shot, he came face to face with Shauna Saxton. The grandmother was in the car with her husband and grandson, and when she heard those shots and she saw the shooter and his gun, she went into action.
I'm like, did that car just backfire? And he was like confused because it didn't really sound like a car backfiring. And oh God. Okay. I looked over my shoulder to left, and the gold car pulled up, and the man was there, and he had a very large gun, and it was pointing at me. And in that moment, the only thing I could think about was driving away really fast. But there were 2 cars in front of me. I started honking my horn. I started swerving, just trying to. And we got a little ahead of him. And then, for whatever reason, the cars in front of us kind of parted a little, and I aggressively made my way away from the gold car. And right when I did that, I heard 3 more shots, just right there. And the thing is that if I had not looked over my shoulder, I wouldn't have seen it and I wouldn't have reacted. At the moment, I was just really running for my life, and we came back home, and all this time we're trying to process what this guy was doing, and then we find out that it was a random shooter, and we got really lucky today.
With more on this, we have Republican Texas State Senator Kel Seliger, whose district includes Midland and Odessa. Thank you again for taking time with us.
It's quite all right. It's good to join you.
Look, there was a great deal of confusion about what was happening, and so many people who found themselves caught up in this chaos, randomly becoming victims of gun violence. This happening just 4 weeks after the massacre in El Paso. Texas is my home state, too, and I have to tell you, when you think about the families affected here, this is heartbreaking to watch.
Any loss like this is heartbreaking. But in addition to the great loss and the threat to police officers and those families is the fact that this was different, and it was kind of a moving gun battle. And so many more people were endangered, and it made the situation very fluid. It made it tough for the police to know just when it had come to an end and what more there was to do. For a while, people thought there were two shooters because of the fluid nature of the situation. So in addition to it being very tragic, it was also a pretty complex situation.
It is different than we've seen in other mass shootings like this. Look, the Texas state governor, Greg Abbott, had this to say about it. I'll raise the quote here. He says, "I thank the first responders who have acted swiftly and admirably under pressure. And I want to remind all Texans that we will not allow the Lone Star State to be overrun by hatred and violence." Goes on to say, "We will unite as Texans always do to respond to this tragedy." In this case, again, the governor raising the bravery of these first responders who took this man on, even cornering him to kill him.
Yeah, it's what we expect of the Department of Public Safety, the police departments in Midland and Odessa. They're very well trained. They have ongoing training now to address active shooter situations, and they did what they were trained to do. The problem is that we have 3 of them seriously wounded right now, and that's sort of the dark side of police work, because it includes that kind of risk.
Are you hearing anything new about possible motive? I know this is very early, but from law enforcement, is there anything new coming out of this?
There's nothing new at this point, because the Texas Rangers and the FBI will not engage in public conjecture. Was this individual acting alone? If not acting alone, did anybody else know that this was contemplated? Was this just the reaction to a traffic stop? Or was there more to it? And what about in social media? Is there something there that somebody should have seen as a warning sign? There are just so many questions to be answered. And until they really know something concrete, I don't think law enforcement is going to say an awful lot, but they're going to know more in the morning.
Senator, of course, this raises the question about gun laws. Should they be tightened, or, as Governor Abbott has done, should they be loosened by signing several new laws making it easier to carry or obtain a firearm? The National Rifle Association noted this back in June. Governor Abbott, it says, signed 10 pro-Second Amendment bills into law, adding that he signed all of the NRA-supported legislation which the Texas legislature sent him during the 2019 session. Goes on to say thank you to pro-Second Amendment leaders and lawmakers in the House and Senate for their work to ensure passage of these measures. So again, the question here is the answer, Senator, more guns out there? Or does it make lawmakers reconsider when they see things like this?
There is no simple answer, because the problems we had today weren't simply caused by the presence of guns in our community. It's why the governor has impaneled a commission on public safety to look at situations like this and answer questions. What are the root causes? And how can we address them long before it comes to violent instances like the one that happened today? As a gun owner, I find it easy enough to buy and own guns of every description. I don't know that that's necessarily the answer, but we need to understand all the options and all the things that we need to do to address situations like this.
Senator, we appreciate your time, and of course our hearts go out to the people there in your area.
Well, thank you. We will pull together as West Texans have always done. We will not, and the families will not recover from these losses, but we'll do those things we can to see that other families don't suffer this way.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The The White House says it is closely monitoring what happened in West Texas. The U.S. President Donald Trump tweeted this, just briefed by Attorney General Barr about the shootings in Texas. FBI and law enforcement fully engaged. More to follow, says the president. We're also hearing from the U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who spoke to reporters before a trip to Poland. Mr. Pence says the White House is sending help and is being kept informed.
I just spoke to the president, and he's at Camp David, and he's closely monitoring the developments in the investigation in the mass shooting in Odessa. Our hearts go out to all the victims, families who had loved ones lose their lives. We commend the law enforcement in Odessa for their swift and courageous response. But at the president's direction, we deployed the full resources of the federal government. They're on site. The president spoke to the Attorney General. FBI is already assisting local law enforcement in the investigation going forward. But we'll continue to monitor those events, but the president's fully engaged.
Democratic presidential candidates are also weighing in after this. The former vice president and presidential candidate Joe Biden tweeting this, quote, "I'm heartbroken, sickened, and angry. Weeks after the horror in El Paso, another community in Texas has been terrorized by gun violence. Enough. We must end this epidemic." And then this from the Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who was a bit more blunt.
Don't know what the motivation is, do not yet know the firearms that were used or how they acquired them. But we do know this is up. Yeah. We do know that this has to stop in this country. There is no reason that we have to accept this as our fortune, as our future, as our fate. And yet functionally, right now, we have.
And then this from Senator Cory Booker, quote, "Beginning on day one in office, I will take executive action to reduce gun violence, closing dangerous loopholes in gun sales, cracking down on gun manufacturers, and investing in communities impacted by gun violence." We'll continue to bring you anything more we learn about what happened in West Texas. But the other major story we're following this day is Hurricane Dorian. Barreling toward the Bahamas. We'll have the latest forecast for you. The islands of the northern Bahamas are about to experience one of the worst hurricanes in years. This storm surge could be 15 feet. That's about 5 meters high or even higher. And to add to that, several hours of punishing winds and heavy rains from that major storm that you see there. It's still unclear exactly where Dorian will make landfall, if it will make landfall in the United States. But emergency crews are ready for whatever comes. Even if it does not make landfall in the U.S., experts warn that the slow-moving storm may cause a great deal of widespread flooding and misery along the East Coast. More than 70,000 people who live in the Bahamas are in the direct path of Dorian. Many people there are doing the best they can to get ready. They're filling sandbags and boarding up windows. Officials urged everyone to take refuge in storm shelters, and they warned what will happen if they don't.
Some, of course, who refuse to leave, but we made it clear to them that if this coming out of Category 4, there's only a window of opportunity of assistance. The police and will not be coming for you in the middle of a hurricane. You will have to hunker down. If your head is hard and stubborn and you will not move, you'll have to hunker down after a certain time because nobody will be rendering assistance to you.
Karen, couldn't be more blunt or clear a message there.
I think that was very clear, very clear. And I'm glad that she put it that way because the conditions that we're expecting here are sustained, maybe for as long as 2 days or somewhere between 24, 36 hours, possibly a little longer. But this is so powerful. It's a Category 4 hurricane. And the hurricane hunters have investigated this. They've seen some higher wind gusts. And we don't see the numbers really changing with this. But this has the potential for quite a catastrophic event. Take a look at this. This is one of the outer bands that just kind of moved across the Abacos. You can see kind of this cluster right here, and as it drifts towards the south, the southwestern edge is looking a little ragged to the hurricane, but still very powerful. From about Freeport all the way over to the mainland in the east coast of Florida, generally in the vicinity of West Palm Beach, it's roughly 90 or something less than 100 miles. So it's going to take a couple of days to get through the Bahamas and then start to make that turn more towards the northwest. Will it make landfall across the Florida Peninsula? We just don't know. I wish we could say definitively one way or the other. And by the way, what is landfall? Well, that means when half of the eye is actually on shore. But you're going to see probably some of the outer bands, at least tropical storm force winds along some of these Treasure Coast, maybe the Space Coast. You'll see a rip current. You'll see bands of heavy showers probably, definitely. Going to see the winds pick up here, so not a good time for boaters or people on vacation with these 150-mile-per-hour winds. As I mentioned, not everybody's going to see hurricane force winds, but this is what we're looking at. Where you see the red, that's hurricane force. Then as you spread out, tropical storm force, but still could have great impact. You remember Matthew? Matthew was a Category 1 when it was languishing here along coastal South Carolina, North Carolina. This was 3 years ago. And it was devastating. They saw rainfall for days in inundated towns. One of those towns was Nichols, South Carolina. Lots of images coming from there that were devastating. So I'm glad Floridians have heeded the warning. The folks not just along the coast, but even inland with this very fragile territory. I hope you have heeded the advice in the Bahamas. I'm sure you have, because we have been sounding the alarm on Hurricane Dorian, Category 4, for days now. And then the computer models, they start to diverge. Some suggest a landfall, meaning the eye is more than halfway on land, and some are suggesting just a glancing blow. But George, even as we go in towards Thursday and Friday of this upcoming work week, then it's coastal Georgia, maybe Savannah, and then Beaufort and Kiowa, Hilton Head, Charleston, up the coast to Myrtle Beach, and then into Wilmington. Those are also areas that need to be on guard and pay attention.
All right, Karen McGinnis, we appreciate it because, look, people are watching very closely to see where this storm goes, and right now there's still some uncertainty there. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks.
Joining now to talk more about what's happening with this storm is Chef Jose Andres. Chef Andres is in the Bahamas with his organization World Central Kitchen to help people there who will be going through this storm. Again, thank you for taking time with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
So usually your organization goes in to help people after these storms pass, but in this case, Chef Andres, you will be riding the storm out as well, correct?
Yeah, here we are in Nassau, in the Bahamas. We were trying to get to Freeport, but the airport was closed around 2 p.m. today. So here we are making sure that we are coordinating with the government of the Bahamas, with the Prime Minister, and just gathering food and learning about everything we can learn about where we should arrive once the hurricane passes, in the north of Freeport and Abaco Island. So we are here ready, getting all the teams and all the volunteers ready to go in and feed anybody that may be in need of a plate of food.
As your team gets to work, what exactly will you do in those hours after the storm, and how will you serve people?
Listen, we are an organization that we are a lot about software, not so much about hardware. We are able to adapt. Our plan is very simple. Let's feed anybody that is hungry. We already have great partners in the Bahamas, like where we are right now, which is Atlantis, which is one of the great resorts. I have a restaurant here. Happens I have a restaurant here. But they're great partners. They only care right now about helping any person in the Bahamas that may need help. So they're giving us a lot of support. And what we do is simple. We already have many partners, obviously in Abaco, in the second biggest city, in Freeport. We already know where we're going to arrive. We already have assets like food. We know water. We are going to be bringing probably more food and water with us. And what we do is very simple. The government of Bahamas has many shelters in both islands in the north, and hopefully we'll go there and we'll support the people on those shelters and anybody else that may be in the island in need of food and water. That's what we do. That's who we are. We are many chefs, and that's what we do. We believe that just adapting and feeding one person at a time, one plate at a time, we can solve an issue.
And we're looking right now, Chef Andres, we see the storm getting closer and closer to you. I want to raise this tweet that you shared on your Twitter feed just a short time ago. You say Hurricane Dorian threatens disaster in the Bahamas as tropical storm watches issued for coastal Florida. CNN with Sea Kitchen, we're here ready to support the Bahamas government with the help of Clinton Global, Bill Clinton leadership. Again, when you go into situations like this, what do you typically see after these storms pass through? How desperate are people in those hours after the disaster?
Well, listen, every hurricane is different. And this hurricane, it's going to be a long one. It's going to be a hurricane that we're going to be following for days. Already we've been following it almost for the last week. We had teams, some of these amazing people behind me, they've already been in Puerto Rico. We were expecting a big hit in Puerto Rico. At the end, luckily for everybody in that island, the hurricane moved north, and Puerto Rico somehow is being saved. So the entire team moved into Florida, and we began almost getting ready because we thought the hurricane was going to go south of Florida, almost going to the Keys. But as we see now, it's moving north and east. And so we had the entire teams in Florida just moving north and almost getting ready also to answer to South Carolina, North Carolina, and who knows, even north of that. But right now we felt that we had to be right here in the Bahamas, helping the great people of Bahamas. And that's what we do every time, just waiting, because sometimes the disaster is so big that even if the government prepare for everything, chaos happens. And what World Central Kitchen does very well is we adapt to chaos, and we are able to assist anybody that may be in need of food or water. That's what usually we do. We wait, but we keep moving non-stop.
It is an interesting and important organization, the work that you do to go into these places and at scale help so many people. Chef Andres, we appreciate your time, wish you the best of luck riding this storm out, and certainly hoping for the best for all people there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're keeping an eye on Dorian for you. We'll let you know as we learn more about where it's going, but also this major breaking story out of West Texas. The FBI is there this hour.
And breaking news.
We're following two breaking news stories this day, the latest on Hurricane Dorian and another mass shooting in the state of Texas. Welcome to viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm George Howell at the CNN Center in Atlanta. And we start in Texas, where police say they've identified the gunman who fired at random from his car while speeding on an interstate and highway. In all, 5 people were killed, 21 others injured. One of the youngest victims, a 17-month-old girl who's now listed in satisfactory condition. Here's how the shooting played out. After state troopers pulled over a gold Honda, the driver opened fire, sped away, and continued to shoot at other vehicles. Listen.
Just driving around, normal day, and then I hear gunshots. There's at least 10 shots. Okay, I got one on my door and one went through, ricocheted right here through my wrist. Can't get it out yet because it's a piece of metal. That's where my legs normally are when I'm driving. I'm just thankful that both shots have missed me. That's all I'm thankful for. That's all I got to say, man. That's all I'm thankful for, that all I got is a scratch with a metal piece in me, and that's it, instead of a bullet hole.
At one point, he ditched his car and stole a mail truck. The end came in the parking lot of a movie theater. After a shootout with police, the gunman was killed. The FBI has sent resources to Midland, Odessa, Texas to help with the investigation. A law enforcement official tells CNN those resources include forensic examiners who will help process the large crime scene there. Former FBI Deputy Director and CNN contributor Andrew McCabe has this to say.
Each time you have one of these incredibly tragic incidents, you have the opportunity to mine it for all the intelligence you possibly can. And some of that is a focus on understanding what that person's progress or trajectory was leading up to the violent event. So we're constantly trying to figure out, are there signs or signals that people exhibit as they are moving down this path to radicalization or extremism in their thoughts and beliefs that ultimately lead to violence. So this will be one more opportunity to build out that entire timeline, that picture, that rich picture of this person's background and what they were saying, what they were thinking, what they were writing, what they were doing in the lead up to this event. And they will use that knowledge to try to be predictive in the way that we view potential future events. I think one of the things we've seen since the last two mass shootings is a lot more forward-leaning law enforcement activity. So you're seeing people around the country being arrested after exhibiting extremist or violent tendencies, people who are collecting firearms or explosive materials, things of that nature. There is no question that law enforcement is taking those sorts of threats and that sort of intelligence very seriously right now, which is a very good thing. There is no single thing that we can do to guarantee that we won't see another mass shooting in this country. But there are many things that we can do to the current legal regime that surrounds things like background checks and accessibility of firearms to folks. We have a system where we're trying to do the best we can, essentially under the weight of an enormous burden of firearms sales. So there is no doubt in my mind that the background check system that we currently work in could be strengthened. It could be more effective. It could be more efficient. That's going to take legislation. Whether or not Congress has the stomach and the political will to do that, I guess we'll have to see.
Earlier, my colleague Ana Cabrera spoke to Julian Castro. The U.S. Democratic presidential candidate says this and every other mass shooting that we've seen in the United States shows it is far past time for gun control.
What we need to do is twofold. Number one, although we don't know the details of this incident, what we do know is that extremism, and particularly white supremacy, has been on the rise. And that's turned into violence in places like El Paso and in Charleston and other places. So we need to give our Department of Justice, of Homeland Security, and our FBI the tools that they need to root out that extremism before it turns into violence. Secondly, we need common sense gun safety legislation, universal background checks, limiting the capacity of magazines, a renewed assault weapons ban. As your viewers know, the AR-15 especially has been, unfortunately, the weapon of choice of many of these shooters. Those are weapons of war, and they don't belong on the streets. In addition to that, we need to do things like institute a 7-day waiting period for the purchase of a firearm. And I would actually raise the excise tax on guns and on ammunition from 10% to 20%, and then use the $600 to $700 million that would garner in revenue every year to invest in gun violence prevention programs in local communities. We know what we have to do. The issue is who's going to have the political courage, the political will to do it. And I think Republicans and Democrats need to work together on this. That's true. It's also true, as much as I'd like to believe Governor Abbott's words, this is a governor that championed and signed legislation that takes effect tomorrow. 8 new pieces of legislation that are going to make it easier for people to carry weapons in Texas. So, this time of reckoning has come, and I really believe that it's a new era in the United States where people of different backgrounds are saying, do something, do something, do something. And I hope that we will, and I'm going to work like others will so that we will.
So as you argue on gun control, and I'll quote directly from you, that it's possible to have common sense gun reform and still have the Second Amendment in place, what do you say to your fellow Texans who believe a moment like this is exactly why lawful gun owners should be allowed to keep them ready and in more public places?
The answer is not more guns. Think about what happened in El Paso 3 weeks ago, for instance. You had a shooter that drove 10 hours to El Paso, knowing that he was going to go into a Walmart that had 2,000 to 3,000 people there in the state of Texas that has concealed carry, it has open carry, it allows campus carry. It has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the United States and people who are carrying with them. He knew that he was going into a situation where many, many people were armed and ready, and that didn't stop him. It didn't make a single difference.
And as Castro mentioned, those new Texas gun laws take effect on Sunday, September 1st. Here's some of what is in them. Licensed handgun owners can now legally carry weapons in places of worship, while schools can no longer prevent licensed gun owners from storing a firearm in a locked vehicle on a school parking lot. Both the weapon and ammunition must be out of plain sight, and landlords can't stop residents from lawfully possessing, carrying, or storing a firearm on their property. A senior hospital official spoke with reporters earlier. Here's what he had to say.
Anybody that hears the sound of my voice, you need to grasp onto your loved ones and hold on to them, and you need to pray for this town and all the towns and the families and the victims involved. You need to hold on to them because this is a scary incident and nobody is guaranteed tomorrow. And if you are here, you can hear my voice, please take a minute to stop and give your thoughts and your prayers to all the families and the victims of this tragic incident.
All right, now turning to the other major story we're following, the northern Bahamas are bracing for the imminent arrival of Hurricane Dorian. That storm extremely powerful, close to a Category 5 storm at this hour. It's forecast to stall over the Bahamas for at least 24 hours and bring a storm surge of up to 15 feet. That's 5 meters. After the Bahamas, the forecast is for Dorian to turn to the north and skirt up the U.S. East coastline. There's still no clear idea of exactly when or if Dorian will make landfall in the United States, but coastal areas are being warned that it could be a prolonged and damaging event, even if Dorian stays over the Atlantic. The best estimate at this moment is that Dorian will turn north and not make a direct impact on Florida's Atlantic coast. Our Randy Kay is in West Palm Beach, not far from where President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort is, and here's the report that she filed.
Here in West Palm Beach, many folks are certainly breathing a sigh of relief, although they're not out of the woods yet with tropical storm force winds headed to this area, they believe. But certainly folks are out and about here at Two Drunken Goats, a very popular bar and restaurant in West Palm Beach. Folks are back to having a good time. General Manager Ryan Brady is here, and you're seeing an uptick in your customers returning.
Yeah, I think people are starting to relax a little bit, being a little more optimistic. We're still cautious, still being, you don't want to drop your guard just yet, but I think people are being a little more optimistic.
Right. And if you were planning to shut down, and you would have brought these screens up and brought all the furniture in?
Oh, yeah, we would have put all the screens up. We'd take down the lights that we got over here. We bring all the furniture inside, lock everything up, so.
And you've been through hurricanes before.
Oh, yeah. I've lived here since I was 14 years old, so I've seen Andrew was the first one I went through, so.
So this is just the Florida way, right? You panic, you worry, and then hopefully it goes out to sea or somewhere else.
Right, yeah. I mean, nobody wants it, but we're ready for it, so.
Right. So you're cautiously optimistic right now that you're not going to get hit?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
You and the rest of certainly this area of South Florida, this area of West Palm Beach, as I said, breathing a sigh of relief, but also keeping their eyes wide open for Dorian if it comes this way. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Randy Kay, CNN. Back to you.
Randy, thank you. The tension is raw in Hong Kong after a night of fire and tear gas, and now crowds of people are shutting down transportation links to the city's airport. Developments in Hong Kong this hour where protesters are blocking transport routes to the city's airport. Police are telling protesters who made it to the airport to leave immediately. They say they will soon conduct a dispersal operation. We're monitoring for any of that. These demonstrations follow some of the worst violence in Hong Kong's nearly 3-month-long protests. And there was chaos between police and demonstrators in a number of train stations late Saturday. That's when police used batons and tear gas to try to disperse the crowds. At least 51 people were arrested, 40 people in one station alone for what police call criminal damages and illegal assembly. CNN correspondent Will Ripley is in Hong Kong. And Will, I saw some of the images of what you dealt with the other day. Tell us about the situation now.
Well, we knew that today, George, protesters had planned to do something at the airport. We also knew that there's an injunction preventing the protesters from entering the airport. The thought being that the crowds inside the airport wouldn't be very big, and they haven't been, at least so far, because they check people's passports and boarding passes. So we are now at the closest train station to the airport that is open right now. And what's happening is protesters are streaming in here by the thousands. Public transportation directly to the airport has been suspended. The bridge to the airport is completely backlogged with traffic. People are getting out and walking. From here, it's about an hour's walk to the airport. So what these protests have essentially done is, even though inside the airport is relatively calm, getting to and from the airport at the moment is pretty much impossible. Normally it takes about a half an hour from my house to get to Hong Kong's airport. If I had a flight today, I would have missed it because I'd still be stuck on the road. We've taken the train to this station, and now we're going to attempt to walk to the airport because, George, that's what a lot of these protesters say they are planning to do. What happens when they get there? What does that mean for flights in and out tonight and in the coming days? We just don't know. But what we've seen, and we saw last night as well, with that huge barricade of fire when protesters used those petrol bombs to light up a barricade and block off a central street in Wan Chai after a number of confrontations with police where there was tear gas launched by the officers and bricks and petrol bombs hurled right back by the protesters. We see this situation escalating, and even though the numbers are not hundreds of thousands, you still have easily thousands of these protesters, many of them young people, many of them now experienced with how to deal with increasingly aggressive police tactics. And a lot of these people out here, they have backpacks, they have umbrellas, they have their gas masks, and it seems like they're ready to fight back whatever they find as they march onward to the airport. So, George, that's what we are going to do ourselves here as soon as we check in and see what some of these crowds of protesters are doing, but a lot of them telling us they're going to start walking.
And Will, just getting into this point a bit more for viewers around the world, we're talking about a major financial city there, Hong Kong, a major international airport, business travelers going back and forth to many different places to conduct business, and you're telling us that people can't get to the airport right now.
It is pretty much impossible to get to one of the world's busiest airports if you're in Hong Kong right now. And I have I have a contact who works at the airport who's still trying to get home after their shift ended. They had to get out of their bus and just start walking across the bridge because the airport is on an island, and you can't take a boat to the airport because it's restricted waterways. You can't fly into the airport in a helicopter if you had the means to do that. Most people get to the airport by taking the Airport Express. But the problem is, if the Airport Express was open, protesters would be able to flood on board, and then they'd be able to get directly into the terminal and do what they did a couple of weeks ago, where they basically clogged up the terminal with thousands of people and they shut down flights. So Hong Kong thought they were getting ahead of the protesters by, disrupting and shutting off the direct train line to the airport. And instead what we have now is the inability to actually get into the airport because of so much gridlock on the streets. Because protesters, in addition to, trying to get, from train stations like this, they're actually walking on the roadways. And that itself is obstructing traffic. So, yes, at the moment, one of the world's transportation hubs, and certainly a major transport hub in this region, it is hard to find a way to get in or out of Hong Kong's airport at this point.
One of the things important to the protesters is to make an impact on city officials on day-to-day business, and clearly, Will, that is happening here. Will Ripley, live for us in Hong Kong. We'll stay in touch with you, Will. Thank you. You're watching CNN Newsroom. We'll be right back after the break. We're following Hurricane Dorian, and the outer bands of that storm are now starting to hit the northern Bahamas. That storm extremely powerful, close to a Category 5 at this hour, and it's forecast to stall over the Bahamas for at least 24 hours and bring a storm surge of up to 15 feet or 5 meters high. There's still no clear idea of exactly when or if Dorian will make landfall in the United States. But the coastal areas are being warned that it could be a prolonged and damaging event even if Dorian stays over the Atlantic. We'll continue to track it for you. And of course, the other major story we're following on this day, at least 5 people are dead, 21 others injured after another mass shooting, this one in West Texas. The gunman went on a drive-by rampage, opening fire from his car after a traffic stop near Midland and Odessa. That's only around 250 miles or 400 kilometers from the scene of another mass shooting in El Paso, Texas 4 weeks ago. In this case, the attacker has been identified as a white male in his 30s. He eventually abandoned his vehicle and hijacked a mail truck. It all ended when police cornered the shooter at a movie theater parking lot. Several witnesses, including Alex Wood, caught it on camera. And then while all of this was happening, a local news station, KOSA, was in the heart of it all. Their studios are located in the mall where that movie theater is, and when people started running, their anchors had to leave the set as they continued to report off screen before eventually returning to air. Listen.
We just kept our microphones on so we could get you up to date because once again, this is not something we thought would ever happen here. There are more officers with guns in here. I just saw them. This is still active. I just saw 3 deputies coming by with guns drawn, so we don't know if perhaps someone is in here. Again, this is very active here in the mall, so I'm going to keep here. Let's see. I'm being told there's more information on the Midland Facebook, so let me go back to the Midland Police Department Facebook. Bear with me because we are trying to get all of the details that we can. Uh-oh. Okay, so we got to disappear. Hang on. We're going to keep our mics on so we can get you up to date. We're told to get out of here.
Right, from the deadly shooting there in West Texas to Dorian in the Atlantic, that is the news this hour. I'm George Howell at